Speaking of good golf, you know me, Tribe. I'm a very holistic sort of an approacher of golf. I believe that certainly you've got to get technique down, but golf is a mental game. Golf is an emotional game. If golf wasn't a mental game, you'd have to explain to me how Jordan Spieth flipped the gears on what was going down at the Open and finished like he went from someone who was battling along in the final round. Matt Kuchar at the RBC Canadian Open this week mentioned, he goes, Jordan honestly wasn't playing that well for the first 13 holes, but then something just happened. Jordan just didn't find his putting stroke. He just didn't suddenly find his golf swing. Certainly, he started to hit better shots, but there was a change mentally, and there was a change emotionally, and there was a change spiritually. Maybe not a change, maybe just something that clicked. And the understanding of how the mind works, the understanding of how to apply the thoughts, the understanding of how to channel the emotions, the understanding, in my estimations, of realizing that mind, body, spirit, and soul all kind of work together. And when those things are harmonized, and when there's synergy between those different elements that exist within you, that's when you hit those purple patches. That's when you get into the zone, as folks call it. That's where you get into the place where you kind of see the line. Have you ever been there? Tweet me if you have, where you look over a putt and you're standing behind it and you see the line and you just know it's going in, and then it goes in. What's that all about? Well, it's with that view that I've always taken on golf and looked at it from a different sort of a mindset, a holistic approach. That's why I try to bring you folks involved in every aspect of the instruction and the teaching and the counseling of this game and of competition and everything that pertains to the playing of it. So as my cell phone is beeping in behind me, hopefully that's another tribe member letting one of us know that they've done well. I'm really happy to bring you this podcast with Dr. Kapil Gupta. He was a dear friend of Lesson T Tuesday on the Mark streaming show, and I think it's kind of poetic justice that just after we've hit our first major goal of 250,000, he's a guy who's coming back to share some of his wisdom with you all and to help you unpack the mental side of things. This segment of the On the Mark podcast, it's brought to you by Synovus. Synovus, the bank of here. Dr. Gupta, it has been a while. How are you doing?
Wonderful, my friend. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, nice to be with you. A lot has transpired since the On the Mark live streaming show. You used to be a regular contributor to Lesson T Tuesday. Now we're a podcast. We download it all over the world. And a lot of folks, I don't believe, know completely who Dr. Kapil Gupta is. So before we delve into the lessons to be learned, please share a little bit about yourself for the listenership.
I am a mental performance coach. I work primarily with professional athletes and CEOs in the realm of the nuances of professional sport and life, as opposed to simply performance. And I think at the end of the day, the interiority of the human being is fundamentally where all greatness comes from. And I think that's the thing that has been largely ignored in modern society. And so those are the things I try to address, are the sort of the deepest elements of a human being, so that all the things that arise superficial to that come out the way they're supposed to come out.
Okay, I sort of need to hold up the yield sign here, because I'm sure a bunch of the listeners are going, okay, the inferiority of the human being, and I'm sure
interiority.
Yes, yeah, interiority. I thought you said inferiority.
Yes.
Oh, pardon.
No, interiority.
Okay, pardon me. Well, fantastic. I've been very much blessed by all of your wisdom and your counsel you've shared with me, and you talk about the interiority and the dealing with life, certainly golf, for the listeners to this podcast who are all golfers downloading to learn more and improve themselves. But you had a personal instance with your young son, Abe, who's a heck of a golfer in his own right, competitive player. the future masters. And so I want you to share that experience, unpack the event for us so we know what went down. And then I want to talk about that because I think there's some really deep and very important lessons our listeners can learn from that.
Yes, and I'll say the most important lesson that can be learned is the lesson for me. And so I'm a wonderful subject in this particular case, since it was, from a personal standpoint, I found it to be quite trying and far from equanimous, let me say, from my personal standpoint. Abe was playing the Future Masters this year, and he was standing after 36 holes at, I think, 6 under, one shot off the lead, and in the final round, I think into the back 9, I think he birdied, if I'm not mistaken, 4 out of the last 5 holes.
I think it was 5 of his last 6. I was reading the news. It was 5 of 7.
Oh, okay.
He got on a big tear over there.
He did. And it was raining steadily all day long. I mean, the rain literally hadn't stopped for a minute all day long. And we went to the 16th green, and the rain came down a little bit heavier, and the water began to pool a little bit on the green. So a rules official came by, and he blew the horn. And so we came inside, and I think at that point he might have been 5 or 6 shots in the lead. I think he was at 10 under at that point.
Okay.
And we came in the clubhouse, and we kept waiting, and the rain wouldn't stop, and the greens began to pool up. But then after a while, the water began to recede, and we only had 2 holes left, which could, in my opinion, have been finished up. And so the committee, for whatever reason, decided that they were going to make it a 36-hole event.
Oh, my goodness!
And they wouldn't even count the first 9. And so they basically handed him a second-place trophy, and it just totally just wiped away all that he had done that day. And the person who was the winner was incredibly gracious, and it wasn't his fault. I mean, he said, we all know who won today, and it was very kind of him to say that. He didn't have to say that. But I'm not going to pull punches or hide anything, Mark. I'm very honest.
No, please.
And I'll say the good or the bad. And I was quite upset by that decision. I felt it to be quite unfair and rather ridiculous, in my opinion.
Well, look, may I stop you, please? Because the Dr. Gupta that I know has always been very understanding of the world, okay? And the fact that you will admit that to me as a friend and a person who's worked together, and certainly to the world through this podcast, it's telling for me, because it once again illustrates to me how this golf thing can become, such a part of us, if you will. I don't know if I'm wording myself properly, but you're expressing your emotions through this event, and I can completely understand it.
We had got there a week, not a week, but I'd say 4 days ahead of time, and we really, really prepared for this event. And I just felt like it was incredibly unfair what they did. And they knew how I felt, and there was no qualms about it. And they interviewed Abe afterwards. I wasn't there for the interview. I had gone to the car. And I guess Abe was, from what I read, was very gracious about it, took it in stride.
Absolutely.
I didn't want to take it in stride, and I still don't, to be honest with you. But having said all that, I will say that what this illustrates for me is that no matter what happens, at the end of the day, I do know for a fact that everything does happen for a reason. I have no idea what that reason is, and I'll probably never know. But that is how I reconcile it in my mind, that you just cannot, what else can you do? You cannot control these things. And Abe made a statement to me in the car. He said, I guess nature didn't want me to win this event.
Okay. And
that was how he reconciled it. And so at the end of the day, it is what it is, but I've been very forthright in how I felt about it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I firmly disagree with what happened, and but I think that perhaps things happen to us in life according to the lessons that perhaps nature or the universe feels that we need to learn. And maybe this was a lesson that I needed to learn was I'm going to take you to the brink of things, and then I'm going to pull the rug out from underneath you, and I really need you to be okay with that. And I kind of think that was what was in store for me.
Well, it's almost the perfect segue to what I want to go to with this podcast with you, in terms of expectation and hope and all of these things that we go into. Not even competition. Yeah. I could be just a club golfer who's going to play with his buds this afternoon, and there's a certain amount of anticipation and hope. I don't want to go out there and do badly. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. I want to ask you about what you wrote after this event, because I'm guessing this was after the event. You wrote a very quick message. It was on Twitter, at your Twitter handle, and you wrote, "My son, as I watched you play the back nine of yesterday's final round, I saw the universe in your eyes, and it brought tears to mine." Do you care to unpack that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, he completely committed to his system. Okay. He totally and completely gave himself to his game, and he did not get off track in the slightest. And as not only a father, but as a teacher, nothing could warm my heart more than that.
Okay, how about we go further, because that's a wonderful observation. The listeners listening to this going, I want to give myself to the game. Go a little further there for us, please. Would you describe for the listener at large who caught that? It's like, man, that sounds like something I want to do when I play. How do you completely give yourself to the game?
I will disagree with sort of the prevailing sort of thoughts on the idea of hope, in that I in my own personal life and in those who I try to help and counsel, I actually believe that hope is a very dangerous thing.
All right.
I think that if you play golf and whatever you do in your life, I think if hope literally isn't part of the equation, then you have a far better chance of accepting what needs to be accepted. Okay. But if hope is the undercurrent, then that hope is an element which infuses every single putt, every single drive, every single walk down the fairway, because you're always hoping for something to go your way. Mm-hmm. And whenever you are hoping for things to go your way, as innocent as it may sound, you are actually setting yourself up for an almost inevitable disappointment, because rarely does anything ever go our way.
Yeah, true.
So you're almost walking in with a hit or two against you if you bring hope to the table. And expectation is simply the child of hope. If you have no hope, you will have no expectation. And then one might say, well, if I have no hope and I have no expectation, then why should I play? And to that, my answer will be that the joy in playing the game must actually be in the executing of the actions and in being in the midst of the environment and giving yourself whole to each and every shot, not because you should, but because one day you will perhaps recognize that that's all you really have. Mm-hmm. No matter whether you're Tiger Woods or the club golfer, that is all anybody will ever have.
Wow, wonderful insights. It makes this spring to mind for me. This is your writings. The mind hopes. This hope creates fear. This fear creates anxiety. This anxiety creates tension. This tension robs the player of his art. And as a golf instructor, I want to come in and add another verse to your little poem, if you will, there, and say the tension is the biggest wrecker of a golf swing I've ever encountered. You care to talk a little further on that, please?
Yeah, the problem with the mind is that when the mind hopes for something, it fears not getting it 4 times as much.
Okay.
So whenever you have hope, the reverse side of that is fear, and you can't have one side of the piece of paper. You will always have both.
Okay. Well, how about
So the only way that you can separate yourself from fear is to first separate yourself from hope.
Wow, interesting. Hey, you know what? It gets me thinking, and this is off the sort of conversational lines, but my mind tends to
Sure.
bounce around the show. I asked Padraig Harrington when he was at the top of the game about that, and he said to me everything he did was out of a sense of fear. There was a fear of failure
Hmm.
always that governed his approach to the game, and this is a three-time major champion. He's like the
Sure.
work that he put in, all the rest of it was kind of governed by fear. What is your take on that observation?
I think fear and the anxiety are really the cancer of modern times,
Okay.
because it is so prevalent and ubiquitous and pervasive. It is at the undercurrent of driving a car or picking up a glass of water. It seems that all that we human beings do these days, we have anxiety as a constant underlying hum to our
True.
existence,
Yeah.
and it is the systematic eradication of that nuance of anxiety which leads to freedom. And Padraig Harrington also said one thing, which I believe it was in the Faraday interview, which I never forgot. And he said, "We are always running from who we are."
There's the truth.
And that speaks once again to the underlying current of, I mean, you know this, you're standing on the Masters range, the amount of fear and anxiety and nervousness and tension as to what's going to happen and what, it's a swimming pool's worth. And I think that is where all of one's energies and laser-like focus and attention has to go, much more so than the technique of things. Because even if one has faulty technique, if he gets to the point where he becomes, at least to a fair degree, free, then he can overcome that. But the opposite doesn't typically work.
Okay, that's perfect for this statement here. This is yours. The greatest, most delightful, and freedom-filled thing in the entire world is to not give a nickel's worth of damn. Now,
Yes.
I agree with that completely. And so many folks have asked me about this because when we call in golf or whatever the case might be, you'll get a Dustin Johnson who looks like he doesn't have a care in the world, and whether he hits the thing
Hmm.
5 miles offline or online, he's going to be the same guy. Um,
Yes.
it's a bit of a knife edge to walk, wouldn't you say? So I want your commentary there. But also for the listener, they're like, okay, well, I want to be free and I don't want to care. That's a difficult place to go. So how does one navigate those turbulent waters?
Like all things, Mark, it's a difficult thing if you view it as a prescription.
Okay, right.
Everything that comes packaged as a prescription, as a tip, and as a technique is always difficult because you are doing it for an ulterior motive. It isn't genuine. It isn't from the heart.
Understood.
And if it isn't from the heart, you're doing it by instruction. But the person who tries not to care is the person who will be subject to it just as much as the one who does care.
Mm-hmm.
So it really comes down to falling in love with the idea of not caring. Not, and this is the key point now, not to prevent caring in order to play better. That is an ulterior motive which will always fail because it is not sincere. It is done for a dangling carrot. When there are no carrots and you want things for their own reward, then the mind actually begins to subside and it begins to acquiesce to your demands. Mm-hmm. But as long as you know that I'm doing it not to care, why? So my shots will be better, so that I'll get a better score. It's a trick. And the mind will see the trick and it'll exploit it.
All right. So correct me if my assessment here is incorrect, but it's basically getting back to falling in love with the execution of the task as opposed to saying, well, if I care less, I'm more than likely going to do better. Where again, now our mind is going to what the potential results or the rewards for the improved play would be.
Exactly. It is about investing yourself in that which you truly, truly, sincerely, and genuinely love, without asking a nickel's worth more.
Well, this then makes sense.
It is about finding the things that you can truly own, and not hoping for the things that you cannot.
Right. Well, but that makes sense given what I'm about to read to you, and this is all these quotes that I'm reading to you are yours. The need to play well is too heavy a burden to bear, and I've seen that especially in the professional game, but it's pervasive in the amateur game as well, because you play in the club championship, you play in your member guest. I had a lady who she comes once in a while for lessons, but then she booked like four in 4 weeks because she was lining up some tournament that she was playing with a friend at her friend's club. And
Right.
she was doing well. The day before she left, she had a lesson with me. She was doing absolutely dandy. I get the report back, and she had the most horrific time she could ever imagine. It's like the thing just fell apart on her. Um,
Yes.
that is what your observation basically describes.
Yes. Need is a prison.
Hmm. I like that. Need is a
You
prison.
cannot whatever you need, even if you get it, the price you will pay for having gotten it isn't worth the getting of it,
Wow.
because you will live in angst the entire journey.
Okay. Well, then for the listeners, and this I'm not trying to make this a prescription thing where, okay, well, if you listen and you apply, and then you're going to shoot better scores, because
Yeah.
that's largely
Yeah.
what. But if folks are downloading this to get that, I want you to then again speak personally, because I've known you now for a little while, and I've watched a bay come up from being a talented young man to a potential star. And so I want you
Hmm.
then to advise, or maybe just speak a little bit, no advice, just share counsel, if you will, as to how you've helped this young man sort of navigate his career as he's moved on as a golfer, and now one of the leading junior players around the place.
Sure. I've lived in this sort of crucible of junior golf for a while now. Abe is now, he just turned 13, and Aman, my older son, is 18, and I'm talking to you from the U.S. Junior,
Mm-hmm.
in Kansas, where Aman is this week. And I will say that the things that I've learned, like I said, I'm a wonderful subject because I've done so many things wrong, right? So I'm a great
Haven't
person
we all?
to learn from.
Uh-huh.
The things that I've learned is that if you're not going to detach yourself, which no one is going to, these things have to be done almost by force because it's so difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
Life will keep putting you into circumstances in which you will see no other wisdom other than to steadily and systematically detach yourself from the performance of your children.
Wow.
Because you will feel so much angst, and you will be in that crucible for so long and so deep, and you'll live and die on every shot. And after a while, you'll come to the point where you say, well, at least some will, and they'll say, there's more to life than this. And I actually have to get to the point where everything is allowed to happen, and we absolutely control the things that only we can control. And whatever happens from there just happens, and we learn from it, and we refine, and we test it again. And we come back, we learn from it, we refine, and we test that again. And that's just the steady move towards the Holy Grail. But it can't be from the standpoint of, I hope you do well today. Because as soon as you have that outlook, which is the default outlook, and believe me, I understand, I've lived there, it gets you to a point where you look back after a number of years to say, you know what, have I really enjoyed this? Has it been enjoyable? Have tournaments been fun? And no, it absolutely, and most of them have not been. It because of the outlook, and I have, we all only blame ourselves. And so you grow older, and you keep revisiting the same situations, and you grow wiser, and you learn, and you find the holes in your perception and your attitude that you begin to fill as time goes on. So I will say that at the end of the day, for any parent, the biggest problem is the way that we look at things, not the things that the kids aren't seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess to make it personal, if you were playing, let's say one of your youngsters or someone listening, from a personal playing competitive point of view, it's the same thing, to detach yourself from the perceived result or the hope of the result, and just to get out there on each shot. And it's somewhat cliched, I guess, just to execute and remain present for each shot as far as possible.
It does, but once again, that can't come about by way of prescription. that has to come about genuinely after one has lived in the angst for so long that he genuinely comes to the understanding which says, you know what, I'm tired of living this way. And what I've learned is that this doesn't work. It doesn't help me at all to hope and to hope that the bounces go my way or the shots go my way, because most of them don't anyways. So my hoping doesn't change the ball, what the ball flight does. So all I can actually do is I understand now. All I can really do is just to hit my shot, and then whatever happens, happens. And coming at it from the standpoint of understanding is something that lasts and becomes consistent and becomes a part of your DNA. But if you come at it from the standpoint of instruction and tips, and if you do this, you'll play better, even though it may be technically correct, it won't work, because if it doesn't come from the heart, it never sticks around.
Truth. That's the truth, indeed. Okay, I feel like I've adequately dealt with said subject, but I've got to ask you this, because you've, I wouldn't say called me out, but gently sort of guided me through the years as being a recovering golf instructor. And yes, you made a statement that I love, and it goes, the golf swing is like cosmetology. If you stare at your nose long enough, you'll begin to hallucinate imperfections. I think, you know what, it's so true. And I mean, the statement speaks for itself. But still, just in closing, you've been gracious with your time. I want you just to share a little insight there for the listeners out there who are perpetual golf swing investigative people who are always looking to tinker on their technique.
Well, first of all, golf score does not come from golf swing.
Amen.
Second of all, if you enjoy golf swing as a hobby, then there's nothing wrong in doing it. But if you believe and if you connect the fact that hobby is going to lead to lower scores, I think that you're going to be disappointed for much of your golfing career.
Yeah.
Thirdly, if there were no driving ranges, there would be much less swing faults.
Preach it, brother. You're bringing sermon here.
Okay. Driving ranges egg one and attract one and tempt one into thinking golf swing, because a driving range is basically a soccer field. It has nothing to do with the game of golf. Golf is fundamentally a different game than the driving range. So if you go to a driving range, you almost are guaranteed to think about golf swing. But if you go to the course exclusively, then you will fall into the habit of playing golf.
Okay.
But if you go to the driving range thinking that I must fix this in order to play well and shoot a better score, quite frankly, we have, and you don't have to take my word for it, you have examples of people all over the world at the professional ranks who, if you examine their golf swing, you would never teach it and you would never laud it. However, if you look at their scores at the end of the day, you would say, wow, that's a pretty impressive score. And he does it consistently. So as we've seen time and time and time again, how someone plays far supersedes how they swing. And if that is understood as an absolute fact, not because I say it, but because the evidence pans it out, then people will begin to understand that the nature of my play, the nature of my strategy, when I look at a hole, this hole I always play bad. That's because the way that the limbs hang off the left side of that tree over there always negatively affect my perception. Therefore, it causes me to slice it. I don't need to go get a lesson to fix my slice. I need to either cut those limbs down or understand that those limbs are the cause of my pushing it to the right, okay? It's all perception. It's all understanding what the golf course does to you physiologically, that's where most of your problems are coming from, not from the mechanics of the action.
I love it. I'm going to leave that with folks and say just meditate on that for a little while, because there's so much truth in your observation. Dr. Gupta, thank you as always. You're a blessing. And I appreciate your time. Where do the listeners go to get more information, to find out, to contact you? Is there a website, social media? Where do they go?
Social media is at citadel-performance.com, and the FOR is a number 4. And the website is SIDDHA-performance.com, and they can reach me there. And they have a bunch of articles online that they're welcome to read that help them with their game, hopefully.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I read a bunch of them whenever I have a free moment. Well, I hope you have a great time. I won't say, well, I'm using that word hope. Have a great time at the US at the US Junior there, and may your youngsters continue on from strength to strength.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure being with you again.
This segment of the On the Mark podcast was brought to you by Synovus. Synovus, the bank of here. Now, it's as the host of this podcast and as someone whose mission is to help all of you to do better in the game and by extension better in life. I know that might have been a funny sort of conversation to listen to, but it was loaded with real wisdom. And I guess if I had to unpack, as I've gotten to know Dr. Gupta through the years, if I was unpacking the thing, it's more, if I had to summarize this, falling in love with the execution, falling in love with the craft of it all, not falling in love with what you might get or what the potential rewards are for good play. Let those just happen, because then the hope goes away. I'm with Dr. Gupta. I'm a father of a young golfer now, and I've seen her be fearful in preparation, very nervous on the day of competition, because your mind's running rampant on what might happen, and there's this hope that one does well. And I've seen me as a dad. Now look, through it, it's been ramped up now because through the years I've taught golfers worldwide. I've taught major champions. I've taught my brother, and so that was pretty close to the heart. And you guys know, if you're close to something, it can really get to one. Through the years as a teacher, I've lived and died by people's golf shots, and as a result, I felt handcuffed. And as I get to a place now, perhaps because it's thanks to Dr. Gupta's advice and counsel, when my little one goes out and plays, I have to battle those thoughts of hope and going, okay, well, I hope she does well. You know what? All she can do is do her best on everyone. All she can do is really love golf and love the craft of it. All she can do in loving golf is understanding golf and understanding that golf is a game of fortune. Golf can sometimes be a difficult endeavor. You know that. You wanting to do it better. Golf can sometimes, it can take you from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in the blink of an eye. But isn't that why we love it? If it was easily conquerable, everyone would want to do it. But it's that constant quest that tickles something within your soul and within your mind, and that's what brings you back. And understanding how to conquer the mind with Dr. Gupta is the first way to start to achieve peace, I guess. And we've had Garrett Kramer on too with the understanding of the mind, and I think the both of them might just come in a way where they are saying to you, don't try to fix, just be. Get out of fixing mode. Just get into living mode, experiencing mode. Dr. Gupta asked me the one day, he's like, do you really experience life every day? Those weren't the exact questions. And I was like, yes, he does. He goes, so when you touch something, are you aware of the way it really touches? When you go outside, are you aware of the way the air smells? Are you aware of everything from a sensory perspective? That's really living. And I know it sounds kind of ethereal, but like I said to you, this is a holistic deal. And if Dr. Gupta didn't know what he's saying, his two boys, Aman and Abay, wouldn't be as good as what they are. Tremendous young players. But more than anything else, I guess they understand the nature of the game. And so I'm happy to bring this to you. I would challenge you to listen to the interview again, a few times in fact. And then consider some of the statements made. And then go to the website. It's SIDD HAPER, the number 4 MANC. So siddhaperformance.com. You can also find Dr. Gupta at Siddha Performance on Twitter. Great stuff in there. Things just to kind of tickle your senses, challenge your mind, and in so doing, help you grow, because the truth of the matter is that we are mind, body, spirit, and soul.